If we accept the theory that the Bonnie masked bully from Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is Cassie's father, the playable protagonist of Five Nights at Freddy's, Help Wanted 2, and then he's also Jeremy Fitzgerald from FNAF 2, then Jeremike stops being just a fan and ship and starts looking a lot more like a legitimate possibility within the lore. Over the last few years, the story has slowly and very deliberately, vaguely, begun to expand on what happened to the four bullies after the bite of 83. We're basically certain the foxy masked bully is Michael Afton. That's as close to confirmed canon as it gets. The last time we see him is in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, where he appears to perish in the fire alongside the rest of his family. Though, to be fair, even that isn't 100% set in stone. That's a whole other video. The Freddy masked bully has started getting linked by many fans to Oswald's father from Into the Pit. The Chica masked bully, we still know next to nothing, not even a confirmed gender, but the Bonnie masked bully is different. Thanks to the newer entries, we're actually getting small, scattered pieces that let us start building a personality, and maybe even an identity. So where am I going with all this? Jeremike is hands down the most popular ship in the entire FNAF fandom, and Scott Cawthon is very aware of it. The real question becomes, is Jeremike purely a fandom fantasy, or is there enough subtle evidence to treat it as a serious theory? And honestly, yes, there are clues. They're quiet, they're easy to miss, but they're there. That's why I've broken this down into 4 main points, each one highlighting a different piece of potential evidence. As the first point, we can establish that Michael and Jeremy were childhood friends. We don't have a ton of explicit details about their relationship beyond that, but it's evident they knew each other well. In the end-of-night mini-games of Five Nights at Freddy's 4, it's Michael, the foxy masked bully, and Jeremy, the Bonnie masked one, who physically lift the crying child and shove him into Fredbear's mouth. This stands out because the other two bullies, especially the one in the Freddy mask, basically just stand around and don't contribute much to the actual act. In typical bully group dynamics, there's often a clear leader, and then a right-hand man or second-in-command who takes a more active role, while the rest tend to just follow along or go with the flow of whoever's strongest or most dominant. This setup fits perfectly. Michael is the instigator and leader, being the older brother, with Jeremy right there as his closest accomplice, actively participating in the prank that goes horribly wrong. It adds a layer of closeness between them that goes beyond random schoolyard bullying. They were partners in crime. All right, it's not exactly a smoking gun, but hear me out as we move on to point number 2. Inside the book, Tickets for Fun, you know, that official collection of physical Fazbear memorabilia, we find an envelope stuffed with the Night Guard's memories, and right there among them is Jeremy Fitzgerald's original 1987 paycheck. But here's the problem. The book clearly belongs to Michael. So, what does this actually mean? It could look like a pretty strong piece of evidence for the Mike Jeremy theory, but does it really make sense? As confirmed in the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, FNAF 1 happened before Sister Location. That means Michael was still very much alive at the time. If Michael and Jeremy were the same person, then Michael would have been the one who got the bite of 87. Yet, when we see him in Sister Location, he looks completely unhurt. So stop for a second and really think about it. Why are Jeremy's personal items mixed in with Michael's belongings? Maybe because the two of them were living together? I genuinely can't find any other explanation that fits. It would actually make a lot of sense for the two of them to be roommates. They were both Fazbear technicians. They knew each other, and with the paycheck being as pitiful as it is, splitting rent could have been a smart way to save some cash. What exactly happened between them after that? We might never know for sure, but honestly, I think this theory holds up pretty well. All right, moving on to point number 3. Among all the collectibles in Ruin and Help Wanted 2, we keep finding the Bonnie and Foxy masks. Just those two. Nowhere do we see Chica's mask or anyone else's. And on top of that, there are other items scattered around that clearly nod to these two specific animatronics. Come on, what other way is there to hint at a connection? All right, let's move on to the final point on the list. Point number 4. The Bonnie mask and the Foxy mask have almost completely opposite colors. I know. This one is pretty vague, and it's definitely the weakest piece of evidence for the theory. It could just be a simple design choice for the animatronics themselves and have nothing to do with the human characters behind them. But hear me out anyway. Have you ever stopped to wonder, what was the actual logic behind which bully in FNAF 4 wore which mask? Because I have. Cassie mentions multiple times that her dad really liked the Bonnie animatronic, So there's clearly some kind of connection between the mascots and the bullies themselves. And here's where it gets interesting. In psychology, red is commonly associated with impulsiveness and aggression, while blue is linked to reliability and calmness. From what we know, teenage Michael was extremely impulsive enough that he didn't even think about the consequences when he caused the bite on his own little brother. Overall, blue and red represent two opposites that complete each other, and that fits perfectly with everything we've been talking about so far.
Moreover, a friend of mine pointed out this small detail to me. You can interpret it however you like, but in my opinion, as I mentioned earlier, there's a connection between the animatronics and their respective bullies. To wrap things up, do the pieces of evidence I've mentioned make JEREMIKE canon? No. However, they do suggest a deeper and more particular connection that could very well develop into something more. I'm sure Scott will provide clearer answers in the future.